Before they were selling out arenas and signing boobs with Sharpies, Poison was just 4 broke weirdos in makeup, sleeping 5 to a motel room, and praying no one noticed the crack pipe in the corner. What happened next wasn't just a rise to fame, it was a glitter-coated train wreck that somehow stayed on the rails long enough to challenge rock forever. In the summer of 1985, 3/4 of Poison packed their dreams, spandex, and whatever wasn't already stained with burger grease into a Ford Pinto and pointed it west. Because when you're chasing fame, nothing screams, we're gonna make it, like cramming into a car that was literally recalled for exploding. Needless to say, that poor Pinto barely survived the trip. Fittingly, it wheezed its last breath right as they hit the Sunset Strip, dying in a true rock star martyr fashion in the shadow of neon signs and strip clubs. And back in Pennsylvania, they'd been grinding it out in bars no one cared about, playing covers for drunks who probably thought originals were just mistakes. But these guys wanted the full buffet. Fame, girls, money, hit records, maybe a Christmas without ramen noodles. So they ditched the East Coast entirely. New York was closer, sure, but LA had better weather and more women running around half naked. And that pretty much sealed the deal. They weren't alone. West Hollywood was crawling with guitar slingers and Aquanet addicts, all jostling for the same dream. Everyone haunted the same grimy landmarks, the Troubadour, Whiskey A Go-Go, the Roxy, and most lived in rooms so small that you had to step outside to change your mind. Handing out flyers on the street like glam rock Jehovah's Witnesses was standard procedure. And if you wanted to eat, there was Rock and Roll Ralph's, the 24-hour supermarket where every musician in town pretended that they had money and a future. Poison set up shop in whatever cheap holes they could find. Warehouses, half-condemned buildings, and once a place behind a dry cleaners on Palm Grove Avenue where the smell of bleach mixed nicely with the stink of ambition and mildew. For Christmas, the band had a sad little tree and zero budget for ornaments, so they tore up their own flyers and used the scraps for decorations. That's Christmas rockstar style, or at least wannabe rockstar style, with a paper shredder and a half-dead pine branch. But that was the vibe. Broke as hell, hyped to the gills, and absolutely convinced that they were one show away from blowing up. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The original guitar player Matt Smith pulled the plug before the band even hit full throttle. And the reason? Because real life came knocking. His girlfriend got pregnant, and like a responsible adult in a band full of man-children, he said, I need to go get a real job and support my family. Fair enough. Rock and roll dreams are cool, I guess, until diapers and rent show up. Enter the audition. And who comes walking through the door like it's no big deal? Slash. Future top-hatted guitar god of Guns N' Roses. And the guy shredded. Played every Poison song note for note like a machine built to melt faces and crush solos. Bret Michaels was like, oh hell yeah, we want him in the band. But Slash had one issue. He actually wanted a dual guitar setup. Poison did not. They weren't looking for a second guitar player. They wanted one peacock up front, not a guitar duet. And so despite the technical perfection, Slash was shown the door. Wild to think that the universe had Poison and Guns N' Roses trading guitar players like it was a fantasy league. And then came C.C. DeVille, walking into the audition like he already owned the band. Total opposite of Slash. Not polished, not precise, didn't even bother playing their songs. He just started hammering out this sleazy, punchy riff that nobody had heard before. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. That riff. Talk dirty to me. He didn't come looking for approval. He came in swinging like the gig was already his. Brett and Bobby hated him. Straight up did not vibe with the guy at all. CC was loud and cocky and obnoxious as hell. But Ricky Rocket, the drummer, saw something. Maybe it was the showmanship or the utter chaos of it. Maybe it was just the hair. But whatever it was, Ricky was in. And once that riff sunk in, the others started to slowly come around. What really clinched it for CC, of course, is that he had the look. It fit right in with the rest of the group. And they also felt that Talk Dirty to Me riff that he was playing could definitely be a hit. Slash would have been awesome in that group, but CC was the right choice, for sure. And of course, this gave Slash the opportunity to really shine in his own setup. But back in '85, Poison was broke as hell, scuttling from one cheap LA hole to another. South Central one week, some warehouse behind a dry cleaner the next, and if it had a roof and didn't catch fire when they plugged in their gear, well then it was home. There were no royalties yet. They were surviving off of women. The glam may have looked expensive, but the groceries were courtesy of women who wanted to hang out, crash for the night, maybe feed the band for a few packs of ramen and a sixer. But while other bands got chewed up for chasing the LA fantasy, Poison stayed locked in the grind. Bret Michaels hustled flyers like they were lottery tickets. He cut a deal with a flyer shop just to get the ugliest, cheapest day-glow green paper they had because nobody else wanted it, which meant it stood out. And suddenly LA was plastered with neon green invites to chaos, all courtesy of a band with no money, connections, and definitely no backup plan. And they didn't cry about it, they didn't blame the venue, they just rebooked the gig and doubled down on promotion. And if they had to play top 40 covers to get the slot, they would do it, and then start sneaking in originals at the end, like a glam Trojan horse. They didn't wait for a break, they just continued to hunt it down. And the look, of course. That's where things got wild. This was LA in peak circus mode. You had Blackie Lawless strutting around with an exploding codpiece like he was packing dynamite in his pants. Odin's Randy showing up in backless chaps. And in the middle of all that freak show energy was Poison. More makeup than a Revlon factory explosion, bigger hair than your mom's wedding photos. And Ricky Rocket said they looked like the New York Dolls had a messy one-night stand with Duran Duran. And of course they got into a few street fights just because of how they were looking as well. Dudes weren't ready to see four glittered up guys in heels walking around like they owned the sidewalk. And that was the point. Bret Michaels never denied it. He straight up confirmed it. The whole look. They wanted those stares. They wanted the static. If you were offended by the image, good. That meant that things were working. Before a look what the cat dragged in was melting faces and going platinum, Poison couldn't even get arrested by a record label. Though they sure looked like they should have been. Capitol Records slammed the door on them more than once, each time with some excuse like, you're too extreme, which in the 80s, LA basically meant we're scared of your eyeliner and your balls. Poison didn't flinch. They didn't dial it down, didn't scrub the glitter off, or try to be safer. If anything, they just cranked it up a bit more and said, well, okay, cool, we'll do this shit ourselves then. Of course, they didn't have any money or a plan, but what they did have was blind confidence and a Rolodex of barely legal connections. Enter Rick Browdy, a wild card of a producer who ended up in Poison's orbit thanks to CeCe DeVille's girlfriend. She was married to Scorpions drummer Herman Rarebell and happened to be Rick's roommate. So naturally, she hooked this whole mess up. The music industry in the 80s was basically a cocaine-fueled Craigslist. So they booked time in a music grinder studio with a budget that could barely buy a used van. 8 days. That's what they had. Total recording cost, $23,000. Scraped together from whatever gigs they could land, whatever merch they could sling in parking lots. It wasn't a budget, it was a dare. And Rick, for all the chaos, had a vision and a mouth. He and Bret Michaels clashed constantly, like a glam rock soap opera with reverb. The worst fight, Rick suggested slowing down Talk Dirty to Me, like to power ballad tempo. Bret and the band just lost their minds, said no way. That riff was cocaine in audio form. Slowing it down would have been like turning a Ferrari into a minivan. And so Poison stood their ground. No compromise. No softening the edges. And then Rick pulls a dick move. He catches a troubadour show mid-recording and comes back raving. Not about Poison, but about a scrappy unside band he had just seen called Guns N' Roses. And he told Poison to their faces that they would never be as good as them. Real morale booster. But instead of folding, Poison doubled down. Like, cool story, now hit record. But as much as they butted heads, Rick still helped shape the record's raw punch. The final sound wasn't polished, it was a wrecking ball, but that's exactly what it needed to be. They didn't really record this album so much as they crammed every ounce of pent-up rejection, glitter, ego, rage into this sonic hand grenade and pulled the pin. And the label execs who passed on it, they got to watch from the sidelines as that grenade exploded all over MTV. Look what the cat dragged in didn't just sneak onto the scene. It kicked the door off the hinges. And when Poison finally dropped their debut, it wasn't through a major label. Capitol Records had already passed on them, like a bad Tinder date, and so the band went with Enigma Records. Because when everybody tells you no, you find the one label still willing to answer the phone at 2 a.m. and say, screw it, let's do it. And they went full send-on with that album cover. Athena Bass, Tommy Lee's sister, because apparently every LA musician has a sibling in makeup, did the glam artillery for the shoot. And the result? 4 headshots that looked like a cross between drag show royalty and the aftermath of a Sephora bender. The cover didn't whisper for attention, it screamed. Glitter, gloss, tease hair so high it needed FAA clearance. And it wasn't just about standing out. It had just the right amount of shock factor to work. Before Capitol came crawling back with a contract and a mouthful of crow, Poison sold 30,000 copies of Look What the Cat Dragged In all on their own. That's without big promo, radio push, just pure hustle, and a whole hell of a lot of hairspray. And then Capitol snatched the rights, slapped their logo on the back, and started promoting the hell out of it, like they'd believed in the band the whole time. And those singles hit hard. Cry Tough gave you that "we might be broke, but we look fabulous" anthem. Talk Dirty to Me turned into a full-blown glam explosion. A real standout on that one, CeCe's solo. This almost kind of revisited the 50s in a certain way. It had almost like that late 50s, early 60s pop hit feel. And you had CeCe kind of kicking out this almost sort of Chuck Berry-ish thing happening with a very hummable melody. And that instantly struck a lot of listeners, was just how catchy this guy's guitar solos were. Interestingly, you would hear Jimmy Eat World and other groups borrow concepts from this very solo. It stands as one of the most catchiest solos ever written on the guitar. Then they had I Won't Forget You, which threw in just enough softcore emotion to get the lighters waving. And suddenly the album that was stitched together in 23 grand of fumes and flyer paper was going platinum 3 times over. 3 million copies sold. All from a record that the producer, Rick Brody, famously called a triumph of image over substance. He told Billboard that with all the grace of a dude who had just been proven wrong in the loudest, most bedazzled way possible. Rick tried to rebottle the Glitter Lightning later with Faster Pussycat, but it never hit the same. And Bret Michaels didn't care about the critiques. He said that they weren't trying to make a masterpiece. They're making the soundtrack to the party before the party. That this wasn't an album that was for overthinkers. It was for getting ready to do shots and probably make bad decisions with someone named Candy or Vince. Dumb fun, neon sleaze, unapologetic sex with a power cord attached. Look What the Cat Dragged In didn't just define glam metal, it embodied it. It was the glitter and guts and guitar solos you could airplay with one hand while chugging a beer with the other. A perfect, glorious mess. No one saw it coming, not even the cat. And success hit Poison like a wrecking ball. And once the smoke cleared, all that glitter started sticking to some really ugly shit. Behind the sold-out tours and platinum plaques was the band spiraling into the usual rockstar cocktail of booze, blow, and breakdowns. The drinking got heavier, as did the drug use. Internal drama started to look less like band tension and more like a reality show filmed in a dressing room full of vodka and unresolved trauma. And at the core of all this, Bret Michaels and CeCe DeVille. 2 guys who needed each other about as much as gasoline needs a match. Their arguments weren't your typical passive-aggressive band squabbles either. They were full-on shouting matches, physical fights, kind of stuff that made roadies nervous and therapists employed. They couldn't agree on anything. Songs, solos, volume levels of the guitar, which always comes up with every guitar player, the color of the carpet, whatever. And that tension eventually blew the whole thing to hell. And then came the car accident. Bassist Bobby Dahl, already battered from tour life and endless internal friction, busted his hand in a crash. A symbolic middle finger from the universe if there ever was one. The band was cracking, bleeding from the seams, and CeCe finally bailed. Or jumped, or was shoved. Either way, the eyeliner-stained Circus lost its loudest clown. Meanwhile, Bret Michaels was off somewhere writing country songs, trying to process his breakup by getting into the old cowboy hat, pretending Nashville had been calling his name the whole time. Glam rock was losing its grip, and Poison looked like a band still stuck in the wreckage of its own after-party. And CeCe? He went full-on rock bottom with accessories. There was a point where he literally stood outside shows wearing a sandwich board, offering $2 photo ops with himself. $2. Less than a gas station burrito to get a selfie with the guy who wrote Talk Dirty to Me. If that doesn't scream how the mighty have fallen, nothing does. But time passed. Poison fans did not forget. They got nostalgic. The hair, the hooks, eyeliner. It all came back into fashion like a bad trend that somehow just got cooler with age. The band that once exploded under the weight of its own success found itself dragged back into the spotlight, not by critics, but by the diehards who never stopped cranking the cassette. Turns out when you go that hard and loud and that ridiculous, you do leave a mark, even if you smear it in mascara on the way out. And even decades after, the album didn't just chart, it detonated, and the blast radius left a mark so deep you can hear it in every other band that figured out hair, attitude, and a killer hook could do more damage than 1,000 critics with their heads up their asses. Poison didn't follow trends, they hijacked them, spray-painted the van neon pink, drove it straight through the gates of rock snobbery. And their whole look, full glam, full throttle, zero apologies, wasn't some marketing gimmick. It was a brick through the window, aimed at the idea that rock had to look a certain way or sound a certain way. But really, their legacy is about kicking the door open for bands who just want to make rock fun again. It wasn't supposed to be clean, safe, or introspective, or have that all-out intensity so much as they just kind of made it more dangerous and loud and a little bit on the stupid side, but a whole hell of a lot of fun. And if it made the snobs uncomfortable, even better. They didn't just influence the sound, they influenced a way to exist. So I covered Slash in great detail, and I went ahead and left a link in the description if you'd like to check out that video. To my subscribers, thank you. You are just freaking awesome. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, kick on those stiletto heels and give that subscribe button a nice big kick. And while you're at it, reach over to the right and give the like button a nice big kick as well. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.